please welcome to the stage Tammy Halevy, Executive Director, Reimagine Main Street, a project of the Public-Private Strategies Institute. Ronnie Chatterjee, Chief Economist, OpenAI, and Karen Kimbrough, Chief Economist, LinkedIn.
Thanks for being here. We've come to the end of a day of extraordinary conversation. We've talked about AI tools, we've talked about policy frameworks, we've talked about adoption barriers to AI, and now what I think is one of the most interesting and important questions is, what does this actually mean for the people who are employed by small businesses? Are we going to see more jobs created? Are we going to see displacement in the labor market? Is work itself going to take a completely different form than it has to date? What does the data and technology tell us? Why don't we start with you, Karen?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm always honored to be sharing the stage with Ronnie, so I'm really happy to be here. So at LinkedIn, I wanted to just kind of share a little bit real quickly about how we frame it out. We're looking at data that spans, nearly 70 million companies and over 1 billion members worldwide. And when we think about companies, we kind of course look at them by size. And what we're seeing right now is just this incredible take-up of AI, both by employers who are looking to hire skilled AI talent. So an example of that is that there's been like a 70% increase in jobs on the platform looking for AI engineers alone. Everybody seems to want to hire one right now, right? But at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of people try to upskill, and we're seeing small businesses working to move into that space, but they have their own special barriers, which I guess we can get into. So overall, it is an AI story, but it's also a story about work that's evolving, it's transforming. We're not seeing jobs get eliminated so much as they are getting converted into a different set of tasks. And that's probably, for me, the most interesting thing. So an example of that is seeing a lot more AI engineers in demand, maybe somewhat fewer software engineers, but also seeing a lot of different types of responsibilities being asked of any job, whether it's an economist or a marketing specialist or a project manager.
Well, first, thanks for being here, and it's amazing to have this conversation. Karen and I have done a lot of things. We're like a road show now.
Yeah, we've got a whole shtick, I think.
Yeah, sometimes I interview her, sometimes she interviews me, and Tammy, I appreciate you having both of us. I think we're seeing a huge change at OpenAI in terms of how businesses are using our tools. It started off really as an accidental consumer platform. When OpenAI was working on the API, there was this moment where they thought, okay, let's release this chat interface and see if people want to play around with it. And less than 3 years later, it's like 800 million weekly active users are playing around with it. And what I think is interesting, we did the first ever study of ChatGPT messages. So my team, I lead the economic research team at OpenAI. We study these messages and try to figure out who is using this and what are they using it for. And we found that there's really 3 big applications right now. And it may surprise you depending on how you use AI. But the 3 applications, the way people are using it, and this includes small businesses, individuals, are practical guidance and advice. I don't know if you all have asked AI for advice. I certainly have. It can be something deep. It can also be, how do I fix this thing around my house? Or how do I have a difficult conversation? It's a very important sort of use of AI. The second piece is seeking information. We can do a web search, you get a bunch of results back. Another way to do it is to ask ChatGPT. We find a lot of people are doing that. And for business owners trying to look up like a specific piece of information, that's really useful. And the last one is writing, which is really the fundamental task at most jobs, especially white-collar jobs. And if you think about the jobs that a lot of small business owners are doing, a lot of it also involves writing, depending on the industry they're in. So you look at those 3 different categories. What we really see AI today as, on the consumer side, is almost like a decision support tool, like a co-pilot. It's not necessarily that the agentic tasks are the most popular ones or deep research. It's actually helping people make better decisions. And I guess what I want to say for folks in the audience is people are looking for AI to show up in GDP and economic output. And it is in some ways we can talk about later. But the primary benefit people are getting from it is what economists call consumer surplus, right? It is helping people do things smarter, better. And that does not show up traditionally in how we measure economic output. And so that's really been the most important part of AI that's really overlooked. I will say small businesses tend to lag behind in technology adoption. What we're seeing here, though, is so many small business owners are on the consumer plan, or something we used to call teams that we now call business. And so the uptake is, to Karen's point, much faster than historical examples. But small businesses are often facing pretty unique barriers when it comes to adopting AI, and one is that lack of training and knowledge about the tools. It is really easy to use ChatGPT in some ways, but all the features of what you could use it for are not apparent for everyone. I do a lot of workshops around the country and around the world actually teaching people how to use it, showing them different features. And some of this stuff, like, you need to work with someone who knows how to prompt it, knows how to ask those questions. And I find that's going to be a big unlock so that small businesses can take these applications and really expand them.
We've had a lot of conversations about helping small business owners understand, seeing how others are using it, seeing the possibilities to then have them move into use. But when we say small business, we're actually talking about a number of different things. Of the 33 million small businesses in the US, the vast majority, as you all undoubtedly know, are solopreneurs or self-employed. You've got a significant share of businesses with 20, and then you have hundreds of business owners. So presumably for each of those segments within the small business space, the use of AI looks different, both how they adopt and what they do. What do we expect for each of those segments?
Well, I'll take a crack at it. So from what we see in our data, and I think this jives with what you're saying, is we're seeing that there's definitely an element of, it sort of lowers the barrier of entry for someone to kind of even get started to launch a small business. Maybe this coincides with this boom in startups that we're seeing right now, and entrepreneurship. But what we're seeing is that it allows you to help with your budgeting, with your marketing plan, with your data analysis. So the AI tools are functionally like extra staff for folks who may be under-resourced but trying to start a small business. It kind of gets them over the bar, if you will. The flip side that we're seeing is that most small businesses are telling us that it's pretty expensive for them to really try to bring in AI in-house. They don't know how to use it. They don't have the funds to have training programs for any of their staff. So they're lagging behind in terms of adoption, what we find, of AI relative to much larger companies with many more employees. And maybe the last thing I'll say is when we surveyed, I think it was a couple thousand small businesses just to understand how they're using it. They were using it for everything from creativity and innovation to simplifying processes to automating different tasks. So they're really actually the broadest. They're probably embracing it the most in some sense because they need it the most to fill in lots of gaps. But they're also flying a little bit more blind, and they're facing a lot more cost headwinds to kind of get it through all of their talent.
Yeah, this is really aligns well with the data that we're seeing too, and it's really an interesting one to think about this filling in the gaps point that Karen's making, because when you think about a typical small business owner, she's a Jill of all trades or a Jack of all trades, however you want to think about it. And so now the ability is to use generative AI tools like ChatGPT to fill in some of those gaps. So before it was really hard to build like a website. Now you can do that, right? Oh, you want to do some coding in Python? Now you can do that. You can build on top of our API and build applications much more quickly than you could before. So now the small business owner who would have had these gaps, would have had to contract out with someone else, or maybe not do it at all, is able to spin up a lot of these things herself. And that is, like, I think, a really interesting opportunity to expand small businesses, not necessarily through hiring in every case, but actually through making a person who is a DIY, do-it-yourself, do even more yourself. And that is a really interesting angle to think through. I think for the larger organizations, that fraction of small businesses that have employees, there's a different use here for this. And I think a lot of it has to do with workflows in the small business. There are some really important workflows that underlie every business. And you have to pick which workflows you think AI can improve. I think whether it's a large or small business, you see a lot of ambitious AI pilots. I'm in a lot of companies and they have these big AI plans. Often the CEO or the board has a big idea about it. When it gets into the implementation phase, and this is true for small businesses too, we don't pick the right projects and use cases. We don't measure that well. Once we have the results of the pilot, we don't really know what to do with them. And I feel like a lot of enterprise implementations are going in that direction. And so it's really important for small businesses to really focus on the problem they're trying to solve, how they're going to measure it, and decide what to do next when it comes to AI implementation. The training can help with that, but it's also just the bread and butter leadership, management, delegation, judgment, and discretion skills they already have being put now to a new technology implementation. So I think the solo entrepreneurs, different condition, using it similarly to consumers, adding different skills to their existing skill set. The organizational and change management piece, when you have an organization for a business owner with employees, that's a different challenge.
You made the point earlier that small businesses are generally slower to adopt. And most of the conversation we generally hear about AI has been at the enterprise. Is the difference in the tools, is there a difference in the tools or just the way it's used and having small business owners understand this could solve your problem, you could use it this way?
I think this is I'd be interested to hear what Karen thinks about this too, but when you think about the history of technology, this might be one of the few times that I can think of where the consumer and the enterprise have equally powerful technology in their hands. Like what's kind of interesting is if you think about what a consumer can do with ChatGPT and then what we can do with our enterprise clients and their chat functions, right? They're using similarly powerful models. I might be missing something here, but I think that's actually pretty notable. And if we think about our small business owners who typically don't have the kind of budget to afford a big technology implementation, but what if they're using it on the business account, which is a lower priced option for smaller teams? What if they're a consumer using it in their personal life? They have access to these incredibly powerful models. So in some ways, this will be a great leveler when it comes to technology, and it might not follow the same script as previous technology revolutions. I think where it gets more difficult is the more sophisticated uses of AI. If you're going to build on top of our API or introduce sort of coding assistance, those might be things that require a little bit more bespoke help. I also think building true end-to-end like agentic workflows to solve a whole work plan. Often we have these forward deployed engineers who go into companies and help them design those kinds of things. They're technical people who can solve very bespoke use cases. Typically, and this is why small businesses often lag behind, you're going to work with your largest enterprises to implement those things because of the economies of scale and being able to leverage that forward deployed engineer over the largest possible organization. This is where small businesses are going to find that gap in trying to solve those kind of problems.
Interesting. So Karen, I think you said 70 million businesses on LinkedIn, which is a mind-boggling number. Yes. sitting in this room.
Worldwide?
Yes, worldwide. But if we think not about the adoption of the tools as much as how AI is changing the nature of the labor market and how small firms are finding talent and sourcing talent, what are you seeing in the data?
Yeah, so some very interesting things. So if you regularly listen to me, I've been on like a 2-year litany about how slow hiring is generally. I do believe we are in a hiring recession, not an economic recession, but a hiring one. Employers are not hiring with any great abandon or interest, although they are hiring AI engineers. But what we're seeing, for example, is that very low hiring rate that I keep talking about is largely amongst the largest enterprises. When I look at hiring of small businesses, their hiring is up 2 to 4% on the year, depending on the size of the small business. So small businesses are hiring. We're seeing a big push for entrepreneurship. I wanted to kind of mention that. We talked about how AI sort of, lowering the barrier of entry for a small business to get started. And I think that's fueling a little bit of an entrepreneurial future of work story that we're seeing across our members. A lot of them who can't find jobs are just starting their own business. But what we're also seeing, I would say, is an incredible demand by employers who are looking for AI talent, and sometimes they're looking for technical talent. That AI talent is such a small fraction of the workforce, less than 1% when you really think about who is an AI technical talent, that most employers feel they need to train or upskill their own talent. And that costs money, so that's a barrier that we're seeing. The other thing, and last thing probably I'll mention, is just that we're seeing professionals choose to acquire these skills themselves. And so an example of that is not that I, as an economist, suddenly am building my own LLM model, but I am starting to learn how to use all the tools to make my work go faster. And that's what we call AI literacy, and we're seeing an incredible run-up in members who are becoming more AI literate in whatever their field is, whether it's marketing or sales or strategy, operations. HR functions. And by the way, I should just mention for HR, there's lots of tools that help people kind of get away with the drudgery. You know, I'm here at LinkedIn, so let me tell you, you might open a role and get 500 applications, and you know what you want, and AI can help you kind of find those perfect 10 or 20 that you really want to look through. And so it saves you a lot of time and lets you kind of spend a little more time on the fun part, which is getting to know applicants and candidates and finding that perfect fit for the role. So I do think AI can really help, but what we're finding right now is that small businesses are trying to use it to hire faster, to solve some of their problems, but they are in no way, in our data, I would say, outpacing the large companies in terms of their adoption rates. They're still behind.
If we think about, you said 2 to 4% growth in small business.
In hiring.
In hiring.
Yeah, they're hiring.
We could imagine a future where AI drives extraordinary productivity,
Yes.
fewer jobs. You could imagine a world where extraordinary change in jobs and growth of the business to hire more. What's the future you anticipate? What's on the horizon?
All right, I'll take a stab, and then I'll let Ronnie paint a different picture of the future. A lot of people seem to be thinking that right now, when you see this hiring slowdown, here's my spicy take, is due to AI. I don't think so. I think that the kind of low-grade fever running in the labor market, the sort of slow and low hiring, the fact that entry-level workers are struggling a little bit more, a lot of that has to do with the fact that we hired so much in 2022 and just before. And so employers haven't really shed any of those workers. They have very bloated roles. There's very low attrition. People are sticking around, job hugging, we call it. And as a result, what you're seeing is that there's just a hesitancy. Nobody's leaving, so there's no vacancy to backfill. And so the only hiring that's happening is for very new roles that are in the AI space. So what that means is that we are seeing a labor market that is a little bit running what I call low-grade fever, but it's still solid, but it's just a lot less dynamic than it had been in the past.
Yeah, I would say, we've lived through big technological transformations before, and this one is inducing a lot of excitement and anxiety because of how quickly AI is being adopted, how powerful the technology is. If you look at it in perspective, you think about in the year 1800, a large percentage of Americans, right, more than 80% worked in agriculture, in farming. And over the next 200 years, that number went down to less than 2%. We produce a lot more food, our standard of living has increased, and people transition multiple times to different kinds of careers. And so the question isn't, can we transition when technology arrives? We did with the steam engine, electricity, the internet. It's how quickly those technologies advance and how much they change the nature of work. Because over a longer period of time, we have a really dynamic economy to have those adjustments. I'd also say, most often in technological transitions, we end up complementing workers with new technology rather than substituting. The conversation a lot of times right now is about substitution, but it's interesting to think about if AI is really useful in your job, it actually may be more useful for you to use it in your job to be more productive and do more, if you like, than replace you. And I think that's what the data is showing so far. We have to continue to watch that. I think when it comes to AI, the question is going to be, which of your tasks can be done by AI? And what are you going to do with your saved time? Are you going to add new tasks that previously weren't part of your job? Tasks don't just stay the same. A lot of these news reports are assuming that our jobs are static when they're really very dynamic. The second thing is, are you spending money or time on your most high-margin, high-value tasks? A financial advisor might run her own small business. Now this might aggregate or automate a very some drudgery paperwork like Karen was talking about, leaving her more time to build relationships with new clients. That could drive a really big boom in business. So it really depends which tasks are being done by AI, which tasks you add, and what you have more time to do. And that, I think, is going to determine what the impact on the job market is. So far, I'm with Karen. I don't see evidence that AI is causing widespread unemployment or something like that. I do think some of the slowdown in hiring has to do with the factors she's talking about, interest rates as well. And I'm sure in the early career job market, there's some evidence right now around AI, but I don't think it can be pointed to the wider job market just yet. It's something we have to continue to watch.
If I could jump back
Please.
in for a second. I was just curious what you're thinking about this as we talk about the future of work. But one of the things that we've seen from some of our research looking at ChatGPT is that companies that actually have a set of heavy users of these generative AI tools actually end up employing more people over time, but they're doing different jobs. And so we're seeing that. We're seeing that the rotation in the tasks for every job is really starting to change. And yeah, there are new jobs coming on board, the AI engineer, the AI artist, and all that. These are all new jobs. But a lot of the same jobs are happening, but the tasks underlying them, the tasks that employers are asking for them to do, and we see this in the job description, those tasks are fundamentally changing.
And I think like so many of the job titles that we take for granted today didn't even exist 20 years ago, right?
Okay, I have a stat for you,
Yeah.
and then we'll give it back to you.
I love
promise.
it.
No.
Here's
Yeah.
the stat. So we looked at who was hired last year. I'll just use the U.S. So of everybody in the U.S. on our platform that told us, hey, I got hired, I got a new job, I'm moving over here, we looked at their new job title, and 20% of them were in a job that pretty much didn't exist in the year 2000. So in the last 25 years, we're already seeing this huge shift. And so here's my question to you.
Yeah.
Is it better or worse if this shift happens quickly? I'm kind of more worried that if it's a really fast shift, people get a little bit lost in the transition.
Sure.
And in the past, transitions were like slower, let people kind of retire out over time. So what are your thoughts?
I think that it's not completely sort of up to us how quickly it happens, partly because the capabilities of AI could advance faster or slower than we think. Right now, we see these charts of how capabilities are evolving. We measure capabilities against these benchmarks called evals. We see how good AI is at solving really complex math problems. We look at how it completes a task, like building a spreadsheet or running an MPV analysis, and we rank it over time and see how much better it's getting at those things. And the capabilities are really increasing fast. It doesn't mean they'll go on forever, and there's lots of different ideas about how quickly they can advance. I do think, though, even if capabilities of AI increase, it's not a fait accompli that it's going to be adopted in organizations right away. Like we have driverless cars that work all around America, but so far, I think, 3 or maybe 4 cities where they're actually allowed to operate. That means that the capabilities of technology can far outstrip its adoption in the short term. And I think the transition will naturally be slowed by some of those factors. I do think the more time we have, and like the best time to start was yesterday, we should definitely start today, is like to help people understand how to use it, how to get the skills they need, and identify, and LinkedIn is a great source for this, what are the jobs of the future? We're launching an initiative called OpenAI Certified, which is going to do this, and Walmart being one of our launch partners, where we're working together with them and other organizations to identify what are the things that people need to learn? How do we teach that to them? And it can't just be like prompt engineering from last year. It has to be something that's going to be durable and relevant, right? And it's difficult. No one has all the answers. And then eventually, how do we get them a job where they can use those skills? So I think that's the kind of work we need to do. Whether it happens fast or slow, like we got to do that now. I do think a slower transition will help us get some of those things in place, test and learn.
We have time for one last question. I could sit and listen to you all for a
question. I
very...
think we took over.
No. I could sit and listen to you all for a very long time. We have a number of small business owners themselves in the audience. What would you give them as practical guidance to both prioritize the things you're describing and to move in the direction that advances sort of the good outcome versus the less good outcome?
I guess I'll go first just to say, I think when it comes to jobs, like at least now in the current market, my first piece of advice would be AI is less likely to take your job than someone who knows how to use AI. And I think thinking about it like that as a small business owner, which is, hey, like my business could be threatened by AI, but if I learn how to use this, that's actually the way to make my business more successful. The second thing I'll just say is pick one problem and really articulate like what you're looking for in terms of a solution. I think just like good management and leadership requires picking a business problem and going after it and solving it, AI doesn't obviate the need to do that. I think a lot of people are thinking about AI as some sort of magic tool you can drop into an organization of any size to solve any kind of problem. Pick one of your hardest problems, right? Articulate it, write down, figure out what you're actually trying to solve, and then put AI up against it. And I think you're going to find that you'll have some success on some of the most difficult business problems of the day.
Karen, you get the last word.
Okay, 2 things. One is the work we've done suggests that AI has this, and we did say we were going to talk about productivity, so I'm going to throw it in here, has the potential to unlock more than $6 trillion in productive capacity for small and medium-sized businesses worldwide. So we really do feel that it is a productivity enhancer over time. The second thing I want to say is, as much as we talked about gaining AI skills, and I'm all for that. You will hear me pounding my drum about AI literacy and using these tools and iterating and learning. At the end of the day, it's going to be a tool that we all have, just like we all now have some kind of smartphone. And so what's going to be the differentiator for all of us is going to be our relationships, those human skills, the judgment, the trade-offs, the conflict resolution, the negotiations. That's all the stuff that's going to set us apart in terms of, whether you get a contract, whether your business is successful or not. AI is one part of it, but the other part is going to be all the human skills that we need to maintain.
It's cause for optimism.
Always.
Please join me in thanking Ronnie Chatterjee and Karen Kimbrough.
Thank you so much.
Please welcome back to the stage Rhett Buttle, President, Public-Private Strategies